I'm using a source I normally don't use. CBS News article called Food Insecurity Driven by Inflation Has People with Higher Incomes Turning to Food Banks. Inflation has more people turning to food banks for help, including people with six-figure incomes struggling to feed their families. Chandra Kelsey of Wallingford, Connecticut, is a mother of three who works full-time as a program director at Yale School of Public Health and sometimes takes on a second job to make ends meet. In their household, two people take home a total of $150,000, but it's often not enough. What? That's not what you bring home after taxes. You know, we have mortgage insurance. We've got one kid on the way to college, one in college. Something as small as $1,000 expense, as a $1,000 expense could throw things off significantly, Kelsey said. For Kelsey, food insecurity is a lifelong trauma, having visited food banks as a child. To be in a position where you are doing okay and then you lose everything the next day, it's humbling, it's scary, Kelsey said. Kelsey has relied on help from Connecticut Food Share, the state's largest food bank, on and off for over a decade. She and two of her children now give back by volunteering there. Nationally, more than 50 million people need help getting food from charities, according to Food Bank Network Feeding America. In Connecticut, 1 in 8 people are food insecure, according to Connecticut Food Share. They're your neighbor, they're your friend, they could be your family, said Connecticut Food Share CEO Jason Jakubowski. Jakubowski Jakubowski said demand for their food jumped 23% last year. He expects another double-digit increase this year. Recently, he's seen more demand from people with higher incomes who need help. Many of them come to us and say, I donated to you for years, and I never in a million years thought I would have to use this service, Jakubowski said. When asked what has changed, he said, a lot of economic unpredictability. Kelsey is scared about her job in the wake of uncertainty over continued government funding of universities such as hers. We are trying to be very cognizant that it could be around the corner, Kelsey said. In its own way, Connecticut Food Share is feeling food insecure. Government Doge cuts last month slashed nearly $2 million from its food budget. Jakubowski said there's no way to replace the funding, but he still has hope. We still live in America. People always step up to the plate. It may not be enough food, but we're going to keep doing whatever we can to try to provide, Jakubowski said. You know, there's a couple of things to tackle here. But first of all, I just want to go back to a video I did within the past few weeks, and it was on why I don't move out of California. And I was responding to Jem and his nonsense, where he and a lot of other people basically take what I call insta fixes, where they just assume that if you move to another state, then magically you'll be able to afford everything and live happily ever after. Of course, they don't tell you what state to move to. But isn't it interesting that someone in Connecticut who makes $150,000 a year with combined income with her husband, and she is struggling to get food. And then, I didn't even really, because I read this article. Well, what happened is that I saw CBS's news coverage of it. But this food bank's demand for food has jumped 23% since last year. And you're seeing where in the United States, more than 50 million people need help getting food from charities. And in the state of Connecticut, not California, 1 in 8 people are food insecure. That's incredible. In the richest country in the world, there is a state, and I'm sure others are just as bad, if not worse, but there is a state where 1 in 8 of the people that live there are scared that they won't have enough food to eat. And I always say that I get so irritated because poverty in the United States is a complex monster. It's something that a lot of times there's no one quick fix, easy way to cure, right? So this woman makes, her and her husband, way more money than I do, right? But they're also paying out way more than I do. And what is the solution to her situation? What, just don't have 2 kids? I mean, you would think if somebody's making uh, literally over a tenth of over a tenth of $1 million a year, wouldn't they be able to afford having, you know, two kids, um, paying for car insurance, medical insurance? It could be a mortgage on their house, it could be rent, whatever. I mean, wouldn't you think that people making that kind of money, in the upper bracket of U.S. families or households should be able to have enough finances to where they're not worried about eating? You would think, right? But that's why I say the United States is so, like, I call it a rotten society, because part of the American dream, part of the, this ideal of, you can achieve as far as you are willing to go, is that there's supposed to be a certain point where you make enough money to where you're not worried about basic necessities. You're not supposed to sit there and make over 100 grand a year, you and your partner, and then, oh, I hope we can eat next month. And I ask, what are they doing wrong? Or should they have not had children? Should they be like sleeping in the car like so many people in my state do? I mean, I don't understand how you can look at that and think that's normal, and then stupid Doge and goofy Musk, cut all of these the funding for this program and make it even more difficult for them to be able to get food to people. And it's like, you are in the richest country in the world, and there are people who are starving to death. And then one of the few little things they can get to alleviate them, the funding for it gets cut, and then the guys who cut it, they're not missing the meal. They're not sitting there worried about, oh man, I hope I can get some bread tomorrow. Just it's so sick, man. And I just want to go back to this whole California bashing nonsense. I recognize the problems of my state. Nobody talks more trash about Newsom than I do. But for God's sakes, man, living in America, one of the biggest issues is the cost of living. That can be food, that can be housing. And oftentimes I try to explain to people is that even if your average, meal is $10, $20, $30, if it's that cost for just one person to eat, imagine that being magnified, multiplied, by 2 people, 4 people, and then you also have to contend with rent, which we've done stories now that's going up nationwide, gas, which we've done stories now that's going up nationwide. And all I'm getting at is, it makes it more difficult to contend with the cost of food. It makes it very realistic that someone who wants to have something to eat might not be able to afford getting something to eat because they're having to pay out all this money for these other things. I don't like saying that, but you also have to remember that she was doing this preemptively. She's worried that her school's funding might be cut and then possibly or get like laid off from her college. And then it's like, what's the solution then? Do we say, see, you should have always been working a second job on top of being at Yale. You should have known that one day, some idiotic president, his little sycophants would get in office and then they would make it to where you can't work there anymore. Ha. God, man. And I say this as sincere as I can be. I might even do another video where I might talk about this, but like, I don't see the point of making larger sums of money if it means not being able to take care of myself. Like if I'm making, and this wouldn't happen, but just let's say 200,000 a year, but then my, rent is 4 or 5 grand a month, and then, it could be leasing a car is like 500, 700, and again, health insurance or healthcare is however many thousands. I mean, just like at a certain point, you sit there and you're like, what's even the point? Like, why would I be excited to make more money if I'm just going to piss out more of it on stuff, on basic utilities, and then be afraid that if I get fired from my job, well, I guess that's the end of me. I mean, it's so rotten. Like, it's so backwards that this is even a thing that someone can do what is supposed to be right. Oh, you work a job, right? You know, you seemingly are always going to it, and then all of a sudden, you might be fired. So get ready to figure out a new way to feed your family. Just it's disgusting, man. And it's, you know, it's sad that this is even a thing that is allowed and tolerated by people who just seem to despise each other. Americans seem to be their own worst enemy in a lot of cases, and the fact that they will tolerate and vote for people that do this stuff is just indicative of that belief.